Hello, I'm Jefficus. The title of this video is going to offend the entire Darktide community because you can't just call Warhammer 40,000 Darktide a first-person shooter. Darktide can best be described as a mission-based horde game with action, FPS, and RPG mechanics. But this doesn't stop myself and other shooter enjoyers from leaning into Darktide's FPS mechanics more than every other element of the game. After all, I'm American. Weapons are part of my religion. So even if this game isn't 100% a first-person shooter, if you're looking for one that takes place in the Warhammer setting, look no further than Warhammer 40,000 Darktide. The game has exceptional gunplay, weapon variety, and it does the Warhammer 40k setting justice. Starting off with the gunplay, the first thing that I have to say is that it's top-notch. It feels like I'm playing any other AAA first-person shooter, but you're in Warhammer 40k, so it's better. When it comes to talking about gunplay, I feel like the most important elements are a weapon's feel, its role, and its performance in that role. The way the guns and other range options feel in Darktide has to feel good to use because for most players, shooting things is going to make up half, if not more, of what you're doing in the game. With very few exceptions, I feel like each gun presents itself with a fair amount of weapon handling, recoil, and reload speed among other things. Without good handling, the flow of the game would be interrupted every time you swapped between your weapons, but you don't really experience that here. The best way to describe recoil in Darktide is that it's fair. Very often you'll be rewarded for being able to control the recoil of your weapon, and if it's too much for you, then you could always use a weapon that is identical to the one you're using, but with a slower firing speed. Reload speed and magazine capacity vary between different weapons, with some weapons featuring a much faster reload but with a more narrow roll, and some weapons featuring slower reload speed but being able to put out enough damage to be good at everything. Before talking about weapon rolls, the one thing that rounds out weapon feel in Darktide is very generous aim assistance. For a lot of guns, you're going to be hitting a lot of shots that you probably had no business hitting, and I believe that aim assistance is balanced this way because of the chaotic nature of the game. The game isn't trying to fight you, it's trying to encourage you to whip your gun out and shoot things. With all this being said, what's stopping everyone from just using the best gun in the game? The answer to this is weapon rolls. At one point, the auto pistol, the weapon being shown right now, was an absolute monster. Its bullets fired in a straight line, it had fantastic aim assistance, and it had insane amounts of damage. However, after a year of nerfs and changes, the weapon has found a niche as a support weapon with very high stagger and suppressing power. Shooting this thing into hordes of gunners, elites, and specials will either throw them to the ground or send them running around looking for cover. My point is that some weapons are built for boss damage, some are built to kill special enemies, and some are all-purpose picks with clearly defined weaknesses. With the exception of a few outliers, each gun brings a different role and playstyle to the table. Lastly, I wanted to briefly talk about how these weapons perform in their roles. The balance in Darktide is always going to need work as players find new ways to break the game, but for the most part, the major factor that is going to determine a gun's performance is going to be the player who is using it, and I think that's exactly how a shooter should be balanced. The guns all perform pretty well in their respective roles, so it's going to be up to you whether you could stretch that out and use the weapons for other things. So the guns feel good, they all have their own job, and you have to get good at the game. But what weapons can you actually get your hands on? This brings us to Darktide's insane weapon variety. Since this game is based in the Warhammer 40k setting, there are a plethora of weapons that Feshar can and has put into the game. And since this is a live service game, we've gotten new weapons over the course of the past year, and more will certainly be added in the future. What's going to determine the kinds of weapons you're going to be able to use is your class, as each class has access to a different set of gear with some overlap featured between certain classes. The general consensus is that if you're a more magic-oriented person, a wizard if you will, you want to choose the Psyker as you'll have access to different staves that each introduce their own unique playstyles. If guns are an afterthought and you'd rather focus on the melee combat in the game, make a zealot and never look back. Literally, just keep holding the W key or forward and you'll be fine. The game literally rewards you for it. But hey, maybe rocks are your thing, as in, you really like rocks. Look no further than the Ogren, a big boy that allows you to throw as many rocks as you want at enemies. For those of you that really want to lean into the first-person shooter aspects of the game, the Veteran is the class for you. On top of the variety that each of the different classes presents in Darktide, the Veteran has the benefit of being the class that is really good at shooting things, and Fatshark has given us a whole host of guns to choose from. As I briefly covered in weapon roles, whatever shooting playstyle that you could think of is probably covered by at least one, if not several, of the weapons that we have to choose from. Darktide features precision weapons that feel amazing to use and offer immediate satisfaction for well-aimed shots. It of course has automatic weapons for those of you who like to spray bullets into crowds of zombies and heretics. And if you really like a weapon but would prefer a different rate of fire, there are often several variations of that weapon that will change that up for you. Perhaps the best thing about the variety in this game are the weapons that are unique to the Warhammer 40k setting, which leads us to the last topic of the video. Darktide really does the setting justice. My personal favorite weapon in all of 40k is the plasma gun, which is a weapon that has a large magazine but overheats as you fire it, potentially causing you to die as the weapon explodes if it exceeds its overheating capacity. In Darktide, it features an alternate fire mode that overheats it even more but allows you to overcharge a big blast and dumpster most enemies in the game. You may be wondering why this would be my favorite weapon in the game, especially considering that at first glance it seems like it requires so much micromanagement. First of all, it's actually quite good. It does consistent damage across all enemy armor types, but it's also a weapon that's fairly unique to Warhammer 40k. The plasma gun captures the grimdark vibe that you're just an expendable soldier walking around with a big Nerf gun that could explode on you at any moment, and I'm here for it. If you play the tabletop game, have read any of the Warhammer novels, or you've played any of the other 40k video games, then you're probably familiar with this weapon. Darktide's plasma gun is an absolute delight to use, and it does the setting justice. Every time that I fire this thing at a special target in the distance, I watch as the plasma bolt rips through a line of 3 or 4 zombies before sinking into my actual target that is 40 meters away, and it makes me smile. Every time. And don't even get me started on the bolter. Hopefully this video presents a viable Warhammer First Person Shooter to you. Horde games aren't for everyone, but I definitely recommend that if you like Warhammer 40k and you like shooting things, then you should give Darktide a shot. This has been Jeffigus. I'll see you in game.